Previously, we covered the core foundations. Now in Part 3, we tackle the forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. Part 3, the men who tracked the flame. The forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. And Part 3, the men who tracked the flame. In the last episode, we looked at the women processing weather data to give Apollo 11 a safe launch window. Today we're staying at Cape Kennedy, but we're watching the rocket leave. The question for this episode is a simple one, and an uncomfortable one. What would have happened if Saturn V had gone wrong in those first 30 seconds of flight, directly over populated Florida? The Eastern Test Range was the organization responsible for every rocket launched from Cape Kennedy. It existed for one purpose beyond tracking: public safety. And in 1969, the infrastructure it operated was serious engineering. At its core were the FPS-16 radar units. These were precision tracking radars, accurate to within meters at range, and they locked onto the Saturn V the moment it cleared the tower. The crews operating them were not watching for success. They were watching for deviation. Any significant departure from the planned trajectory would show up on their screens within seconds. That data fed directly to the flight dynamics officers monitoring the vehicle's path in real time. They were cross-referencing actual position against the planned trajectory corridor. Essentially a narrow envelope the rocket had to stay inside, stray outside it, and the question immediately became, is this a correction in progress, or is this a failure? Here is where the weight of it lands. The range safety officers, the RSOs, held a specific authority. If the vehicle presented a credible threat to populated areas and could not be corrected, they were authorized to send a destruct command. This was not a symbolic authority. Saturn V carried a flight termination system, pyrotechnic charges fitted to the structure that, on command, would rupture the propellant tanks and cut the vehicle apart. The intent was to scatter burning propellant over the ocean or uninhabited areas, rather than allow an intact vehicle to impact a town. To send that command, the RSO required two conditions: a confirmed trajectory violation and the absence of any recovery. The decision window was measured in seconds. There was no committee. There was one officer watching a screen with his hand near a covered switch. The men holding that authority on the 16th July 1969 have never been publicly named in mainstream accounts of the mission. There are no documentary close-ups of them, no books written about their morning. And yet, they sat through the entire powered ascent, carrying a burden that no one in Houston or Washington shared in quite the same way. The flight went perfectly. Saturn V followed its trajectory corridor. The RSOs watched clean data scroll across their screens, and they never touched those switches, which means history recorded them as doing nothing, when what they actually did was hold their nerve through 12 minutes of first stage and second stage flight without once needing to act. That is not nothing. That is the job. Apollo 11's safe departure from Earth depended on the rocket working, yes, but it also depended on a quiet, prepared chain of human judgment that was ready, genuinely ready, to end the mission the instant that changed. Next episode, Part 4. We follow the mission past the launch and into the next critical phase, and meet another group of people whose names you almost certainly don't know. If this series is useful to you, subscribing means you won't miss the next part when it comes out. That's all I'll say about that. That is Part 3 of the forgotten jobs that made Apollo 11 fly. In Part 4, we explore the next key question. Subscribe so you do not miss it.